Under the blinding, indifferent fluorescent lights of the megamart, Hannah Reyes felt like she was drowning. At just 32 years old, every breath felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 failures. Her arms ached as she held Samuel close to her chest, his small body warm and trusting against her worn gray jacket. In her pocket, crumpled and counted 3 times that morning, was the sum total of her hope, $31 exactly. The cashier's voice cut through the air like a blade. 31.42? Hannah's stomach dropped. 42 cents. It might as well have been 42,000. Her fingers trembled as they found the large blue can of hypoallergenic formula, the only kind Samuel's sensitive stomach could tolerate. The can that had taken her a week to save for. The can that meant her baby wouldn't cry through the night in pain. With tears burning behind her eyes and shame flooding her chest like ice water, she slid the can back across the counter. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. An apology no mother should ever have to make. Behind her, the line bristled with impatience. Carts rattled. Sighs echoed. Someone muttered under their breath. But Hannah couldn't hear any of it over the roar of her own heartbreak. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly known, was that someone was watching. Before we continue with what happens next, I need to pause for just a second. If you're feeling something right now, anger at the system that puts mothers in this position, heartbreak for Hannah, or even just curiosity about what happens next, it's reminding us that behind every struggle is a real person. But here's the thing. YouTube doesn't show these stories to people unless you tell it to. If you don't hit that subscribe button and like this video, the algorithm assumes you don't care. And stories, like Hannah's stories, that make us feel, that make us think, that remind us of our shared humanity, they just disappear into the void. So if this story matters to you, if you want to see how a chance encounter between a desperate mother and a dangerous man changes everything, then please, take 2 seconds. Hit subscribe. Tap that like button. It costs you nothing, but it tells YouTube that stories with heart still matter. Because Hannah's about to meet someone who will change her life forever, and you deserve to see what happens next. Now, back to the story. 10 feet away, pretending to examine a display of imported olive oils, stood Gabriel Marchetti. He was a man who commanded fear with a glance, who controlled half the city's underground with nothing more than a phone call and a nod. His dark suit was cut to perfection, his presence a quiet, dangerous authority that made people instinctively step aside. But today, he wasn't thinking about territory or power. Today, he was holding his daughter's hand. Abigail, just 7 years old, stood beside him in her bright mustard yellow coat, her small fingers wrapped around his. She had insisted on coming with him to pick out a special juice brand she'd seen in a commercial. Gabriel, a man who dealt in blood and leverage, was powerless against those innocent, pleading eyes. And now, Abigail was tugging on his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice soft and confused. "Why is that lady crying?" Gabriel's gaze had already found Hannah. He'd been watching the scene unfold with the sharp attention of a man trained to notice everything. He saw the tremble in her hands, the way her shoulders curved inward, as if trying to disappear, the protective way she held her baby, as though he were the only good thing left in a world that had abandoned her. He saw the exact moment she pushed the formula back. And something inside Gabriel Marchetti, something he thought he'd buried years ago beneath concrete and cold calculation, cracked open. For a single, stunning moment, he wasn't a crime boss. He wasn't a feared name, whispered in back alleys and boardrooms. He was a father who remembered what it felt like to be desperate. To watch someone you love suffer and feel utterly, catastrophically powerless. His own wife had died giving birth to Abigail. He'd held his newborn daughter in a sterile hospital room, surrounded by machines that couldn't save the woman he loved, and made a vow. No child would ever want for anything on his watch. Not his daughter. Not any child. And now, Standing in a grocery store on an ordinary Tuesday evening, Gabriel watched a young mother apologize for not being able to afford milk for her baby. His jaw tightened. Abigail looked up at him, her eyes wide and glistening. "Can we help her? Daddy? The baby looks hungry." Gabriel looked down at his daughter, this small, perfect soul who somehow saw the world with a clarity that his brutal life had almost stolen from him. Then he looked back at Hannah, who was now walking toward the exit with her head bowed, her meager bag of groceries clutched in one trembling hand, her baby pressed against her chest. A woman the world had decided to ignore. A mafia boss had just witnessed a single mother's greatest sacrifice, and his next decision would change both their lives forever. What Gabriel didn't know was that this moment, this chance encounter in a crowded supermarket, would unravel a connection that stretched back 70 years to a battlefield soaked in blood and a debt his family had never been able to repay. What Hannah didn't know was that the stranger watching her from across the aisle was about to offer her something far more dangerous than charity. An opportunity, a lifeline, and a doorway into a world where kindness and violence walked hand in hand. The can of formula was just the beginning. Gabriel watched Hannah disappear through the automatic doors, her silhouette swallowed by the darkness of the parking lot beyond. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, he stood completely still. Around him, the store continued its indifferent rhythm, scanners beeping, carts rolling, the endless muzak droning overhead. But inside his chest, something unfamiliar was happening. Something he hadn't felt since the night Abigail was born, and his wife's hand went cold in his. Empathy. Raw, unbidden, and absolutely inconvenient. "Daddy?" Abigail's voice pulled him back. She was looking up at him with those enormous eyes, the ones that could make him move mountains or burn cities, depending on what she needed. "Are you going to help her?" It wasn't really a question. It was a test. Children had a way of doing that, holding up a mirror to show you exactly who you were in the moments that mattered. Gabriel's hand tightened around his daughter's fingers. "Stay right here with me, sweetheart. Don't move." He turned and walked back to the checkout lane, where Hannah had stood moments before. The cashier, Kevin, according to his name tag, was already scanning the next customer's items, his face a mask of practiced indifference. The blue can of formula sat on the counter behind him, abandoned like evidence of a crime no one wanted to witness. "Excuse me," Gabriel said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made people stop mid-sentence. "That formula, I'll take it." Kevin blinked, confused. This one?" The lady returned it. "I'm aware." Gabriel pulled out his wallet. Fine Italian leather, probably worth more than Kevin made in a week, and extracted several crisp bills. "Ring it up, and add a rotisserie chicken. A bag of those apples, fresh bread, and..." He glanced down at Abigail, who was watching him with an expression of fierce approval. "And whatever baby food you have for a 6-month-old. The good kind." Kevin's fingers fumbled over the register keys. This was unusual. People didn't usually swoop in to buy items that other customers had returned out of desperation. It felt voyeuristic, uncomfortable. But the man in the expensive suit wasn't asking permission. "That'll be..." "It doesn't matter what it'll be," Gabriel interrupted, laying down a $100 bill. "Keep the change." Kevin's eyes widened. The change would be nearly $40. "Sir, I can't." "You can." Gabriel's tone left no room for argument. He took the bags, heavy with groceries that weren't for him, and turned to leave. Then, he paused. "The woman who was just here, which way did she go?" Kevin pointed toward the far end of the parking lot, toward the bus stop that sat like a lonely island beneath a flickering streetlight. "She's probably waiting for the number 12. Comes every half hour." Gabriel nodded once, a gesture that felt almost like a dismissal, and walked toward the exit. Abigail skipped alongside him, her yellow coat bright against the dull gray of the store's industrial flooring. "You're being a hero, Daddy," she whispered. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Heroes were a luxury he'd never been able to afford. Heroes didn't run organizations built on fear and leverage. Heroes didn't make the kinds of decisions he made in backroom meetings where men's fates were decided over glasses of scotch. But when he looked down at his daughter's face, glowing with pride, he couldn't find it in himself to correct her. Maybe, just for tonight, he could pretend. The cold evening air hit them as they stepped outside. Gabriel's driver, Marcus, was already moving toward them from where the black Mercedes was parked in the VIP section near the entrance. But Gabriel held up a hand, stopping him mid-stride. "Give me a minute," he called out. Marcus nodded and stepped back, his expression carefully neutral. He'd worked for Gabriel long enough to know when not to ask questions. The bus stop was exactly where Kevin had indicated, a small, covered bench bolted to cracked concrete, illuminated by a single streetlight that buzzed and flickered like it was on its last breath. And there, sitting on that bench with her shoulders hunched against the cold, was Hannah. She had her baby Samuel. She'd probably whispered his name 1,000 times today, pressed against her chest, one arm wrapped protectively around him while the other clutched her single plastic bag of groceries. She was staring off into the middle distance with the hollowed-out expression of someone who'd been defeated so many times they'd stopped expecting victory. Gabriel approached slowly, deliberately making his footsteps audible so he wouldn't startle her. Abigail, sensing the delicacy of the moment, stayed quiet at his side. Hannah heard him and looked up. Her eyes, red-rimmed and exhausted, widened slightly in confusion when she saw him. A well-dressed man in a neighborhood where well-dressed men didn't usually walk, carrying grocery bags that clearly weren't his. "Excuse me," Gabriel said, his voice softer than it had been in the store. Gentler. The voice he used only with Abigail, now extended to this stranger. "I think you might have forgotten something." He held out the bag containing the formula. Hannah stared at it. Then, at him. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Gabriel watched the emotions flicker across her face like a silent film: confusion, recognition, embarrassment, and then something that looked dangerously close to hope before she crushed it down. I didn't forget it," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't afford it." "I know." Gabriel set the bag down gently on the bench beside her. "That's why I bought it for you." The words hung in the cold air between them. Samuel stirred against Hannah's chest, making a small sound, and she automatically adjusted her hold on him, her body moving with the practiced ease of a mother who knew every sound, every movement, every need. "I can't," Hannah's voice cracked. "I can't take that." "Why not?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She looked at him, really looked at him, and Gabriel could see her trying to make sense of what was happening, trying to find the catch, the angle, the hidden cost. "Because I don't know you," she said, but her eyes kept drifting to the bag, to the blue can visible through the plastic. "Because people don't just do things like this. Some people do." Gabriel knelt down so he was at her eye level, aware that his expensive suit was now touching the dirty concrete. Abigail moved closer, peering around her father's shoulder with open curiosity. "I have a daughter. Her name is Abigail. She's 7. "Hi," Abigail said softly, giving a small wave. Hannah's expression softened fractionally when she looked at the little girl in the yellow coat. "Hi, sweetheart." "Your baby is very small," Abigail observed. "What's his name?" "Samuel." Hannah's voice was thick with emotion. "His name is Samuel." Gabriel reached into the bag and pulled out the can of formula, holding it out to her. "Samuel needs this. You know he does. So please, take it. Think of it as one parent helping another." The last barrier in Hannah's defenses crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and hot, as she reached out with a trembling hand and took the formula. She clutched it to her chest like it was made of gold. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to." Gabriel stood, brushing off his knees. But he didn't move away. Instead, he glanced at the empty road, at the bus stop sign that indicated the next arrival wasn't for another 23 minutes. "It's cold out here. And dark. My car is just over there." I'd be happy to give you a ride home. Hannah's head snapped up. Oh, no, I couldn't. You could, Gabriel interrupted gently. It's no trouble, and truthfully, I'd feel better knowing you and Samuel got home safely. She was shaking her head before he finished. You've already done so much. The bus will be here soon. Really, I'll be fine. But even as she said it, a gust of wind cut through the parking lot, and Gabriel saw her shiver, saw the way she instinctively curled tighter around Samuel, trying to shield him from the cold with her own body. Abigail tugged on Gabriel's sleeve. When he looked down, she whispered, "Daddy, the baby is cold." It wasn't manipulation. It was simply the truth observed by a child who hadn't yet learned to look away from uncomfortable things. Gabriel looked back at Hannah. "Please, let me help." For a long moment, Hannah just stared at him. And in that moment, Gabriel understood that she was weighing something far more complex than just a ride home. She was weighing pride against necessity, independence against her child's comfort, the fear of accepting help from a stranger against the exhaustion of fighting alone. Finally, she nodded. Just once, barely perceptible. "Okay," she breathed. "Thank you." Gabriel picked up her bag of groceries before she could protest and gestured toward where Marcus stood waiting by the Mercedes. As they walked across the parking lot, this unlikely trio of a crime boss, his innocent daughter, and a struggling mother, Gabriel, felt that unfamiliar sensation in his chest again. It felt almost like redemption, and for the first time in years, Gabriel Marchetti wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was capable of being more than the sum of his sins. Hannah sat on the cold metal bench at the bus stop, staring at nothing. The plastic bag at her feet held bread, oatmeal, and 2 jars of baby food, enough to last 3 days if she stretched it. Samuel had finally stopped fussing, his small body heavy with exhausted sleep against her chest. She could feel his warm breath through the thin fabric of her jacket, each gentle exhale a reminder of why she kept going. The evening air was getting colder. She pulled her jacket tighter around them both, checking her phone for the bus schedule. 32 minutes. Her arms were already aching. She didn't hear the footsteps approaching until a shadow fell across her lap. "Excuse me." Hannah's head snapped up. The man from inside the store stood before her, holding 2 grocery bags. Up close, he was even more imposing tall, with the kind of presence that made the air feel heavier. But his eyes were gentle, almost apologetic. "I think you forgot something," he said, extending one of the bags toward her. Hannah looked inside and saw it immediately. The blue can of formula. Her throat tightened. "I didn't forget it," she said quietly, her voice trembling with something between embarrassment and defiance. "I couldn't afford it." "I know," Gabriel said. "That's why I bought it for you." The words hung in the air between them. Hannah stared at the can, then at the man's face, trying to understand what was happening. Strangers didn't do things like this. Not in her world. Not without wanting something in return. "I can't take that," she said, her pride rising like a wall. It was the only thing she had left that still felt like hers. "I don't even know you. My name is Gabriel." He glanced at the small child in her arms. "You have a baby who needs formula. I have a daughter who once needed formula. It's not complicated." "It is to me," Hannah said, standing up abruptly. Samuel stirred but didn't wake. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity." Gabriel's voice was calm, maddeningly patient. "Think of it as one parent helping another." Hannah wanted to walk away. She wanted to tell him to take his pity and his expensive suit and leave her alone. But Samuel was warm against her chest, and she knew God. She knew that he would be hungry again in 3 hours, and she had nothing to give him. Her hands were shaking as she reached out and took the bag. She refused to meet Gabriel's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. Gabriel nodded, but he didn't leave. He glanced at the empty street, then at the bus stop sign. "How long until your bus comes?" "Half an hour." Hannah sat back down, holding the bag like it might disappear. "I'm fine. You don't have to wait with me." "I'm not waiting," Gabriel said. "I'm offering you a ride." Hannah's head shot up. What? My car is right there. He gestured toward a sleek black Mercedes parked across the street, its polished surface gleaming under the streetlights. A driver stood beside it, still as a statue. It's cold. You have a baby. Let me take you home. Every instinct in Hannah's body screamed danger. She didn't know this man. He was too well dressed, too confident, too comfortable offering help to a stranger. Men like him didn't just appear in grocery stores and save struggling mothers unless they wanted something. I don't think that's a good idea, she said carefully. Gabriel studied her for a moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, understanding. He took a step back, giving her space. I'm not going to hurt you, Hannah. She blinked. How do you know my name? Your credit card, he said simply. When you paid inside, I saw it. He pulled out his phone and opened it to a web page, a legitimate business website. My name is Gabriel Marchetti. I own a security consulting firm downtown. You can Google me right now if you want. I'm not a random stranger. Hannah stared at the phone screen, her mind racing. The website looked real, professional, but that didn't mean anything. I have a daughter, Gabriel continued, his voice softer now. Abigail, she's 7. If I saw someone offer her a ride when she was alone with a baby, I'd want her to say no, too. He glanced back toward the Mercedes. But it's 30 degrees out here, and that bus is going to be late. It always is on this route. Hannah looked at Samuel, then at the distant headlights crawling down the street. None of them were her bus. If I say yes, she said slowly, you take me straight home. That's it. Straight home. Gabriel agreed. Nothing else. Against every ounce of better judgment, Hannah stood. She followed Gabriel across the street, her heart pounding. The driver opened the back door without a word, his face expressionless. The interior of the car was like stepping into another world. Soft leather, warm air, the faint scent of something expensive and clean. A little girl sat in a booster seat, clutching a juice box. She looked up at Hannah with wide, curious eyes. Abigail, Gabriel said as he slid in beside his daughter. This is Miss Hannah. She and her baby are going to ride with us. Hi, Abigail whispered shyly. Hi, sweetheart, Hannah managed, her voice unsteady. Gabriel gave the driver her address. Hannah felt a fresh wave of shame as she pictured her building cracked steps, peeling paint, the broken security door that never locked. But Gabriel's expression didn't change. He simply settled back in his seat and began a quiet game with Abigail, asking her to spot things outside the window. The ride was mostly silent. Hannah kept her eyes on the passing streets, acutely aware of the vast gulf between this car's interior and her life. Everything here was soft, clean, expensive. Everything in her world was hard. When they pulled up in front of her building, Gabriel insisted on carrying her bags to her door. Hannah was too exhausted to argue anymore. She led him up 2 flights of stairs, the stairwell dim and smelling of old carpet and someone's burnt dinner. At her door, she fumbled with her keys. Inside, she could hear Mrs. Chen's television through the thin wall. This is me, she said, finally getting the door open. Gabriel handed her the bags, his gaze sweeping across the small apartment beyond the cramped but spotlessly clean living room, the playpen in the corner, the stack of library books on the coffee table. Thank you, Hannah said again, and this time she meant it. Really? You didn't have to do any of this. Yes, I did, Gabriel said quietly. His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something in them she couldn't name. Pain? Maybe. Or recognition. Take care of yourself, Hannah. And Samuel. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the stairs. Hannah closed the door and leaned against it, her legs finally giving out. She slid to the floor, Samuel still sleeping peacefully in her arms, and let herself cry. 3 days later, Gabriel sat in his private office on the 40th floor of a downtown high-rise. The city sprawled below him, glittering and indifferent. On his desk was a thin manila folder. He hadn't been able to stop thinking about the woman from the grocery store. It wasn't like him. He dealt with people in crisis every day, people who owed him money, people who worked for him, people who feared him. He'd built an empire on the ability to compartmentalize, to separate business from emotion. But Hannah's face kept appearing in his mind. The way she'd held her baby, the quiet dignity in her refusal of help. So he'd made a call. Just a simple background check, he'd told himself. He needed to know she was safe, that she wasn't in danger. It was the responsible thing to do after letting a stranger into his car with his daughter. That's what he'd told himself. Now, staring at the folder, Gabriel's hand trembled slightly as he opened it. The first few pages were routine. Hannah Reyes, age 32. No criminal record. Formerly employed as a paralegal before Samuel was born. Currently working part-time at a diner. Behind on rent. No family in the area. Then he saw the name. Father. Marcus Reyes, deceased. Gabriel's blood ran cold. His fingers moved faster now, flipping through pages until he found the photograph. A police file photo from 15 years ago. Detective Marcus Reyes, decorated officer, killed in the line of duty. Gabriel remembered him. God help him, he remembered. It had been a routine meeting, or what passed for routine in his world. A corrupt police captain on Gabriel's payroll had been skimming money, getting sloppy. Gabriel had sent his people to handle it quietly. But Marcus Reyes had been investigating the captain. He'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The official report said it was a shootout with an unidentified suspect. Marcus Reyes died a hero. Gabriel knew the truth. His men had killed him. He closed the folder, his jaw tight. For 15 years, he justified it as collateral damage. The cost of doing business. Marcus Reyes had been an honest cop in a dirty system, and that had made him dangerous. Gabriel had never known he had a daughter. A daughter who was now raising a baby alone, 42 cents short of feeding him. The weight of it crashed over Gabriel like a wave. This wasn't random chance. This wasn't fate. This was a reckoning. He picked up his phone and made a call. I need you to put together a file, he said quietly. Everything on the Reyes family. And I need options. Legitimate options. When he hung up, Gabriel sat in the gathering darkness of his office, staring at the folder on his desk. He'd taken Hannah's father from her. He couldn't give that back. But he could give her a future. Not as charity. As restitution. As the only form of justice a man like him knew how to offer. And this time, he wouldn't let anything stand in his way. 2 weeks passed before Hannah's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer. Creditors had a way of calling at the worst times, and she'd gotten good at letting unknown numbers go to voicemail. But Samuel was napping, and the apartment was quiet, and something made her pick up. Miss Reyes? The voice was professional, female. This is Jennifer Caldwell from Marchetti Security Solutions. We received your resume for the administrative coordinator position, and we'd like to invite you in for an interview. Hannah's mind went blank. I'm sorry. I think there's been a mistake. I didn't apply to your company. Oh, a pause. Well, your information came through our recruiting system. Perhaps a job placement service submitted it on your behalf? Hannah hadn't used a placement service in over a year. But the woman on the phone sounded genuine, and the position she described, administrative coordinator with benefits, handling, scheduling, and client communications, was exactly the kind of work Hannah used to do, the kind she'd been good at. The pay is $52,000 annually, Jennifer continued, with full health coverage and flexible hours. We're looking to fill the position quickly. Would you be available tomorrow at 10? $52,000. Hannah's current job at the diner paid barely $19,000. This had to be a scam. Or a mistake. Or, Miss Reyes? Yes, Hannah heard herself say. Yes. I can be there. She hung up and immediately Googled the company. Marchetti Security Solutions was real. A sleek, professional operation with an office downtown. Legitimate contracts with businesses across the city. Nothing suspicious. Except the name, Marchetti. Hannah's stomach twisted. She thought of the man in the expensive suit, the one who'd bought formula and driven her home, Gabriel Marchetti. It couldn't be the same person. That would be too much of a coincidence, wouldn't it? She spent the next 24 hours in a state of anxious preparation. She borrowed a blazer from her neighbor. She rehearsed answers to interview questions while Samuel played at her feet. She told herself this was real, this was her chance, and she couldn't afford to waste it by overthinking. The next morning, she dropped Samuel at the Sitters and took 2 buses downtown. The office building was glass and steel, the kind of place where everyone looked important and purposeful. Hannah felt like an imposter the moment she stepped through the revolving door. The elevator took her to the 12th floor. The reception area was all clean lines and soft lighting, with the company logo etched into a marble wall. A receptionist greeted her warmly, checked her name off a list, and asked her to wait. Hannah sat in a leather chair that was more comfortable than her bed at home, her hands folded in her lap, her heart hammering. "Miss Reyes?" She looked up. A woman in her 30s stood before her, smiling. "I'm Jennifer. Thank you so much for coming. Mr. Marchetti is ready to see you now." The world tilted slightly. "Mr. Marchetti?" Hannah's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Yes. He likes to personally interview all potential hires for senior positions. It's just through here." Hannah followed Jennifer down a hallway, her mind racing. This was him. This was the same man. And he'd somehow gotten her resume, somehow arranged this interview. Somehow, Jennifer opened a door to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Gabriel sat behind a large desk, the same quiet authority in his posture that she remembered from the grocery store. But today he wore a different expression, something more serious, almost somber. "Hannah," he said, standing. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Jennifer excused herself and closed the door. Hannah remained standing. "What is this?" "It's a job interview," Gabriel said calmly. "I didn't apply here." "I know." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit. Let me explain." Hannah wanted to walk out. She wanted to demand answers. But she also wanted to know why a man who'd helped her once was now offering her a job she desperately needed. So she sat, her spine rigid, her hands gripping the armrests. Gabriel sat back down, his hands folded on the desk. "I'm going to be direct with you because I think you deserve that. After I drove you home 2 weeks ago, I did a background check. It's standard procedure when I meet new people, especially when they've been in my car with my daughter." Hannah's chest tightened. "You investigated me." "Yes." No apology in his voice, just honesty. "And I found something I didn't expect. Your father was Detective Marcus Reyes." The name hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't heard anyone speak it aloud in years. "He died when I was 17, Hannah said quietly. "I know." Gabriel's jaw tightened. He was killed during an investigation into police corruption. The case was never solved. Hannah nodded. She'd lived with that unsolved mystery for half her life, the wound that never quite healed. Gabriel leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "Hannah, 15 years ago, I was involved with people who operated outside the law. I've since built legitimate businesses, cut those ties, but back then, I was part of the world your father was investigating." He paused, and she saw something raw in his expression. Pain, guilt. "I didn't pull the trigger, but my organization was responsible for his death." The room seemed to shrink. Hannah couldn't breathe. Her hands gripped the armrests so tightly her knuckles went white. "You killed my father." "My people did," Gabriel said, his voice steady but heavy. "I gave orders that led to his death. I didn't know he had a daughter. I didn't know anything about him except that he was a threat to my operation. That doesn't excuse it. Nothing excuses it. But I need you to understand that's not who I am anymore." Hannah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You think you can just tell me this and offer me a job? You think that makes it better?" "No," Gabriel said, standing as well. "I don't think anything makes it better. But your father was an honest man in a corrupt system, and he died because of it. And now his daughter is struggling to feed her baby because the world didn't take care of his family the way it should have. That's not your responsibility. Yes, it is. Gabriel's voice was firm now, commanding. I took your father from you. I can't give that back. But I can give you what he would have wanted for you, a stable life, a future. Security for your son. Hannah's eyes were burning. This is guilt money. Call it whatever you want, Gabriel said. But it's real. The job is real. You have paralegal experience, organizational skills, and you're overqualified for this position. You'd be good at it. And it pays enough that you'll never have to choose between rent and formula again. I need to pause the story right here because this moment, this impossible, devastating choice is exactly why I tell these stories. Hannah is standing in an office, facing the man whose actions orphaned her, and he's offering her the one thing she needs most, a way out. But here's what breaks my heart. If you're watching this without subscribing, without hitting that like button, YouTube's algorithm will bury this story. And the hundreds of hours I spend researching, writing, and crafting these narratives, stories about impossible choices, about redemption, about the messy reality of human goodness, they'll just disappear. If this story is making you feel something, if Hannah's struggle matters to you, if you want to see how this impossible situation resolves, then please don't let the algorithm win. Hit subscribe, tap the like button. It takes 2 seconds, and it tells YouTube that stories with depth and heart deserve to be seen. Because what Gabriel offers Hannah next will change everything, and you need to see it. Now, back to the moment that will define both their futures. Hannah's voice was shaking. If I take this job, I'm accepting money from the man who destroyed my family. You're accepting an opportunity to build a new one, Gabriel corrected. For Samuel, your father spent his career fighting for justice, for doing the right thing even when it was dangerous. Don't you think he'd want his grandson to have a chance? Don't you dare tell me what my father would want. You're right. Gabriel's shoulders dropped slightly. I have no right, but I'm offering you this anyway. Not because I think it erases what I did, because it doesn't, but because it's the only form of justice I know how to give. Hannah stood there, trembling, her mind a storm of rage and grief and desperate, aching need. She thought of her father, the way he used to check her homework at the kitchen table, the way he'd taught her to stand up for herself. She thought of Samuel, sleeping peacefully at the sitters, unaware that his mother was making a choice that would define his entire life. She thought of the formula can she'd had to return, the shame, the crushing, suffocating weight of poverty. If I say yes, she said slowly, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for my son. I understand, and I'll never forgive you. Gabriel nodded. I don't expect you to. Hannah took a shaky breath. What exactly would the job entail? For the next 30 minutes, Gabriel outlined the position. She would coordinate schedules for the security teams, handle client communications, manage the administrative operations of the office. It was work she'd done before, work she was good at. The hours were reasonable. The benefits were comprehensive. Everything about it was legitimate. There's one more thing, Gabriel said as the interview wound down. In your father's name, I've established a trust fund for Samuel. It will cover his education preschool through college. You'll have full access to the documentation. It's irrevocable, and separate from your employment here. Hannah's throat closed up. Why? Because your father can't do it, Gabriel said simply. And someone should. She left the office an hour later with a job offer letter in her hand and tears streaming down her face. She sat in her car in the parking garage and sobbed for her father, for the impossible choice she'd just made, for the relief and shame and grief all tangled together in her chest. Then she dried her eyes, started the car, and drove to pick up her son. 6 months later, Hannah sat at her desk on the 12th floor, reviewing the week's schedule. Samuel was in a good daycare now, one with bright rooms and patient teachers. They'd moved to a better apartment, one with heat that worked and windows that locked. She'd paid off her debts. She had health insurance. She had savings. She'd earned every bit of it. The job was demanding, and she'd proven herself indispensable. She arrived early, stayed late, and handled crises with a calm efficiency that impressed even Gabriel's most skeptical employees. She rarely saw Gabriel himself. He kept his distance, conducted his business from the executive floor, and communicated through Jennifer when necessary. But sometimes, late in the evening when most of the office had emptied, she'd see him through his office window, working alone. She still hadn't forgiven him. She probably never would. But she'd built something here, a life, a foundation, the kind of stability her father would have fought for. One evening, as she was packing up to leave, Gabriel appeared at her desk. "Hannah," he said, "do you have a minute?" She nodded, wary. He handed her an envelope. "Samuel's trust fund documentation. Everything's finalized. And there's something else." He paused. "Your father's case. I've provided the FBI with information that led to arrests. The captain who ordered his death is going to prison. It won't bring him back. But justice," Hannah whispered. "Some form of it." They stood there, in the quiet office, two people bound by violence and guilt and a strange, unspoken understanding. "Thank you," Hannah said finally. "Not for the job, not for the money, but for giving her father's death meaning." Gabriel nodded. "He'd be proud of you." Hannah left the office that night with Samuel's hand in hers, stepping out into a world that finally felt like it had room for both of them. She'd made peace with the impossible choice. She'd taken the opportunity and transformed it into dignity, and somewhere, she hoped her father understood. So if Hannah's journey moved you, if you felt something real in these last 30 minutes, then prove it. Hit subscribe, smash that like button, drop a comment telling me what you thought. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to this channel, because there are more stories to tell, more impossible choices, more moments of grace in the darkness. And I can't tell them if the algorithm decides nobody cares. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And if you subscribed, thank you for making sure stories like this survive. Until next time.